Everyone assumed this was just another totaled hypercar getting a second chance at life. But something about this particular rebuild made one of the most powerful car companies in the world deeply uncomfortable. Because what started in a regular workshop with a wrecked Bugatti may have just exposed a system that was never supposed to be seen by the public. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. If you enjoy rebuild investigations and automotive deep dives, hit subscribe because we do this kind of thing a lot around here. Matt Armstrong just did what most people in the automotive world were genuinely afraid to do on camera. He exposed, in real time and in full public view, exactly how a billion-dollar hypercar company protects its repair monopoly. By simply documenting the rebuild process and posting it online, he accidentally pulled back the curtain on how major manufacturers control repairs, restrict parts access, and regulate servicing in ways that protect an enormous hidden revenue stream. And the most striking part of all of this is that the rebuild itself proved something manufacturers have spent years telling owners was essentially impossible. That these cars can, in fact, be maintained, serviced, and repaired through independent channels. Something Bugatti owners were quietly led to believe could never happen without the factory's direct involvement. That myth just got dismantled in front of millions of viewers. Now, before we get into what the internet actually found, let's start at the beginning because the setup here matters a lot. Point 1. When Bugatti first responded to questions about why independent repairs were so difficult, the explanation sounded completely reasonable on the surface. The argument was safety. These are not ordinary cars. The engineering tolerances, the carbon fiber monocoque, the quad-turbocharged 16-cylinder engine, the bespoke transmission, all of it operating at limits that most workshops simply are not equipped to handle. And honestly, that argument landed well initially. Nobody was disagreeing that a Bugatti Chiron is more complex than a family sedan. The safety framing made sense. Authorized technicians, factory-trained specialists, proprietary diagnostic tools. It all felt logical, but that's where things got even stranger. Because as Matt's rebuild progressed and more people started watching, a different question began forming in the comments. If safety was truly the reason, why was parts availability itself being restricted? Safety explains why you might want trained technicians. It does not explain why an independent mechanic cannot even purchase the components needed to attempt the work. Point 2. And this is where the internet started paying attention. Viewers with sharp eyes and automotive backgrounds began noticing something during the rebuild footage. Certain components on the Bugatti, parts that had been presented as exclusive, bespoke, and utterly unique to the brand, looked suspiciously familiar. Suspension geometry components, brake hardware, certain electronic modules. Some of this architecture was drawing comparisons to parts used elsewhere in the Volkswagen Group ecosystem. Because Bugatti, at the time of this rebuild, was a VW Group company. And the VW Group shares platforms and components across dozens of brands. Now that alone is not scandalous. Platform sharing is completely standard in the industry. What made people angry was the contrast between the shared parts reality and the mythology that had been sold to buyers. If a component is largely derived from a shared group platform, why is sourcing it independently treated as though you are trying to perform surgery without a medical license? The comment section started filling up with people doing side-by-side comparisons. Forums lit up. And the more people looked, the more the exclusive mystique started to feel like a carefully maintained illusion. Point 3. But the real turning point came next. Because what the rebuild made unavoidably visible was not just about parts. It was about the entire ecosystem that manufacturers build around ultra-luxury vehicles. Think about what actually happens when you own a Bugatti and something goes wrong. You cannot simply call an independent specialist. Parts availability is controlled at the manufacturer level. Repair authorization often requires factory involvement. Diagnostic software is proprietary and not available to outside workshops. Certifications required to legally service these vehicles are gated behind manufacturer approval. What this creates, in practice, is a situation where you technically own one of the most expensive cars ever made, but your actual freedom over what happens to that car is profoundly limited. You own the asset. The manufacturer retains a kind of permanent invisible lease over everything that touches it after the sale. And that invisible lease is worth an extraordinary amount of money across the lifetime of every vehicle they produce. Point 4. As the rebuild videos kept coming and the view counts climbed, something shifted in how people were processing what they were watching. It stopped being just a rebuild series and started becoming a document. Comment sections that usually fill up with jokes and timestamp requests turned into genuine analysis threads. People were pulling up manufacturer statements, cross-referencing parts databases, tagging automotive journalists. Owners of other ultra-luxury brands started chiming in with their own stories about being told repairs could only be done at approved facilities hundreds of miles away, at eye-watering hourly rates, with waiting times measured in months. And slowly, methodically, the audience watching Matt work on this car started connecting dots that the industry had spent years keeping separated. This was not just a difficult repair. This was a window into a system. And the system was designed with a very specific purpose in mind. Point 5. The perception flip happened fast once it started. For decades, the narrative around brands like Bugatti was pure reverence. These are rolling sculptures, engineering art. The price reflects the craftsmanship, the exclusivity, the experience of ownership. And that narrative was mostly unchallenged because the people who could afford these cars rarely complained publicly, and the people who could not afford them had no reason to look closely. But the rebuild changed the audience. Suddenly, millions of people who had never thought critically about hypercar ownership were watching this process unfold in real time. And the story they were absorbing was not a celebration of engineering excellence. It was a story about a company that had structured its entire post-sale relationship with customers around maximum dependency. Admiration started curdling into suspicion. And once that suspicion took root, people started applying it to every other brand in the segment. Point 6. And that is when the conversation broke out of the automotive world entirely. Because the Bugatti rebuild landed right in the middle of a much larger global debate that has been building for years across multiple industries. The right to repair movement. You might know it from the tech world, where companies like Apple have faced intense scrutiny and legislative pressure over their repair restriction practices. Or from agriculture, where farmers have fought back against tractor manufacturers who lock diagnostic software behind dealer walls. The argument is always the same on the manufacturer side: complexity, safety, quality control. And the counter-argument is always the same too. Once you sell a product to someone, they own it. Fully, including the right to repair it however they choose. The Bugatti rebuild did not start a movement, but it handed the movement one of its most cinematic and watchable pieces of evidence yet. A guy in a workshop rebuilding a supposedly irreparable car, watched by millions of people, while the manufacturer sat quietly and said nothing useful. Point 7. And here is where the consequences start to feel genuinely significant. Because Bugatti owners, actual owners of these cars, have been watching all of this unfold. And many of them are now sitting with a realization that changes the entire value proposition of what they bought. The idea that these vehicles required factory servicing was not just a policy. For many owners, it was a core part of how they understood the car's complexity and exclusivity. That belief justified the costs. It explained the limitations. It made the dependency feel reasonable. But the rebuild demonstrated that the car is not as untouchable as the mythology suggested. And if it is not as untouchable as the mythology suggested, then the dependency that owners accepted was not an unavoidable technical reality. It was a choice. A strategic, commercial, carefully maintained choice by the manufacturer. That is a very different thing to accept. And for people who spent $2 million or more on a vehicle, accepting it does not come easily. What began as a YouTube rebuild series about a crashed Bugatti has quietly become something much harder to categorize. It is part consumer investigation, part industry exposé, part accidental documentary about power and ownership in the world of ultra-luxury vehicles. The question of who truly owns an ultra-luxury vehicle once it leaves the showroom floor is not settled. The legal frameworks around right to repair are still evolving in most major markets. The manufacturers are not going to voluntarily loosen their grip on a revenue model that generates billions in post-sale income. And the owners who are now paying closer attention are not going away. Whatever comes next in this story, the most important thing the rebuild accomplished might not be the car itself.